to welcome to the Tuesday, March 30th, 2021 meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. Normally we start with input public comments, and we will have two opportunities for that. The first will be our first item on the agenda, which is item 1A, County Administration, public hearing, order and resolution 21-03-30-01 in the matter of adopting the FY 2021 supplemental budget number 3, making, reducing, and transferring appropriations. We have Christine Moody here with us, who is going to give us a summary of this item, if you would, Christine.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Bernie, Commissioners. So as mentioned, this is the third supplemental budget of this fiscal year. We do time this supplemental to be in line with when you will see the proposed budget here in about a month, so that the current year budget is as accurate as possible next to the proposed budget for 21-22. So we've highlighted in the memo some changes that are occurring. I'll just highlight a few for you. Primarily, you'll see that there's quite a bit of revenue related to the COVID-19 pandemic, including some grant funds from the state that were used for local businesses, some money coming into public health, and our Human Services Division. A lot of that rental relief money is coming through that fund as well. The changes in the supplemental total about $34.6 million. There's FTE being added of about 11 in various places, including one that I'll highlight for you in our county clerk's office. With interest rates so low, there is quite a workload occurring with deeds and records. And so records recording revenue is up, and so adding some FTE there to handle that workload. The total budget will be right about $888 million if the supplemental is approved as submitted, and FTE will be just under 1,800. So with that, I'm open for questions or opening the public hearing. Thank you.
With the board's permission, I think I would like to open the public hearing at this time. Okay. This is a public hearing on a supplemental budget for the current fiscal year budget as allowed under ORS 294.471 and 294.473. This public hearing is required under ORS 294.473 due to one or more funds amending expenditures by greater than 10% from current budgeted amounts. Notice of this hearing and summary of the changes were published as detailed in the supplemental budget order and resolution included in this agenda item. If there are people from the public here, I really direct your attention to those materials. Participants may testify for or against any item contained in the budget. So this is now open to public hearing. And Diana, I am going to request that you open this and let us know if there are any people wishing to testify.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. I do show that someone has registered for comments. I'm not sure if they're on the line for the public hearing or if they're on for public comment. So if you have logged in to speak on the budget item, please raise your hand now. Chair Bernie, I do not see any hands raised, so I will return the meeting to you.
Thank you very much. This would be the time to now have discussion and action by the board. Are there any Board of Commissioner members that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, unless I can't see correctly, in which case yell and let me know that you're raising your hand. Seeing none, we have two options in front of us. Either option one is to move to approve the supplemental order and resolution as submitted. Option two is to move to amend the supplemental order and resolution and request staff return at a later date if required based upon the amendment requested. Is there a motion? Vice Chair Vice Chair Farr, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Burney. I move to adopt Resolution 210330-01 in the matter of adopting the fiscal year 2021 supplemental budget number 3, etc.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It has been moved by Vice Chair Farr, seconded by Commissioner Buck, to approve the supplemental order and resolution as submitted. Are there questions or comments to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, signify by saying nay. And the order and resolution is approved as proposed by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Buck, unanimously 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are now, forgive me, on item 2, adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none. Item 3, is there any emergency business? Seeing none, we are now on the second public comment opportunity of this meeting. With this virtual format, if you are watching, you are registered in this meeting system as attendees. Attendees are webinar participants who are audience members viewing the meeting. Your microphone and webcam are automatically muted as attendees. There will be a time, now is the time of the meeting open for public comment. If you wish to participate, I'm going to ask you to raise your virtual hand to be recognized. You should see an icon, a hand icon on the device you're using to watch the meeting. Press only once to raise your hand. When public comment begins, Diana will call names. When your name is called, you'll be unmuted and given 3 minutes to speak. When your time is up, you will be re-muted so the next person can speak. The intent is for everyone to speak. Diana, are there any hands up for public comment?
Yes, Chair Burney, I do see one hand raised for public comment. I am going to bring up a timer because I didn't see them earlier. I see Arwin Moss to Spain. Arwin, I will unmute your phone and I will bring up the timer and then you start your public comment. Arwin, I do show yourself muted.
Okay, am I on now?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Good morning. I didn't actually plan to speak to y'all this morning. I was driving to work and I had gotten CC'd on a message from a woman who's someone I've been helping in the community. And I noticed that Steve Manella and a few other government folks, as well as other providers, had been CC'd in this email. And it just kind of moved me to dial in and just tell y'all about this person and also how it connects to our systems not working for folks, unhoused folks particularly. So this is a woman I've been working with a little bit to help. She is deaf, in a wheelchair, is paraplegic, so she does not have movement below the waist. She has a belly catheter. She's trying to manage on the streets and has been for 8 months. This is an unusual person in the sense that she has advocated for herself fiercely with all systems folks that I could think of. And as you know, I do work with a lot of systems for our folks in advocating. And this is a person who has already covered that ground and done a lot of work. And because she's in her 40s, she has kind of fallen through the cracks. The COVID criteria for being at risk tends to favor the older folks. And so this is somebody who should not be unhoused by many different measures in our community, and yet still is, and is on every wait list and continues to be bumped down. And so I feel like this is something to address with the HMIS system. She has gone through the front door assessments. She has done all the things that I would want her to do. And having now worked with HMIS and worked with county referrals, there are aspects of the system that need to be improved so that people like this do not fall through the cracks. And so I just wanted to put a plug in for that. We have to create better systems. I also know that all of us out here in the community are working really hard to serve this population in the best ways we can, and we're just overrun. And so when we're looking at funding opportunities for this community into the next year, I would just like to put a plug in for funds that are specific for staffing. The types of supports that we need are, many of us are underpaid for what we do, and we need more of us. And so I want to put a plug in for that. And if we get people housed, they need continuing support in case management and or assistance in staying stable, in staying in housing. And that's often a step that gets missed in our community. So wanted to just call your attention to a particular individual, but also how I think this person represents problems in our system. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana,
Thank you for your public comment. Commissioner Burney, that is all, or Chair Burney, excuse me, that is the only person signed up for public comment, so I will return the meeting to you.
Thank you, and thank you for your comment. This is an opportunity for commissioners to respond to that public comment or make remonstrances of their own. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Burney. And while Arwen is still on, if Arwen still is monitoring, just a call out to Arwen, Master Spain, and Carry It Forward for the amazing work that they have done over the last couple of years, taking advantage of both county property that they've been able to use and utilize to a really high level in terms of housing people and providing additional services that aren't provided anyplace else in the community. So Arwen, if you're still there, thanks for all of your work at Carry It Forward, and the staff that you have surrounded yourself with is very effective. The second thing, Chair Burney, is a message that I received yesterday, and it's a praise for staff. And I'll look at Steve Mokrahasky as I'm saying this because it's the staff that is being talked about. Cindy Wheeldryer, we all received a message from Cindy Wheeldryer, former county commissioner from East Lane County. And Cindy said that yesterday I drove my three disabled clients up to Austin Stadium for their first vaccination. We were extremely impressed with the county's very well-organized mass vaccination operation. My first shot stung like crazy, so I bet envious when all three felt nothing after the shot. But Cindy would like to take this opportunity to tip my hat to all of Lane County public health employees for the amazing job y'all have done in the past year to educate the public and protect Lane County citizens from this deadly virus, etc. She goes on with a couple of paragraphs of extreme praise, Steve Mokrahasky, for staff. Praise that you've heard from each of the Board of County Commissioners and from other individuals, but I suspect you never tire of it, nor do I tire of passing it along whenever I have an opportunity. Steve, please pass that along. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Butt.
I do want to thank Arwen for being willing, as she's driving to work, to just hop on a call and come and speak to us. That's wonderful that people can do that in this particular format that we've been working in this last year, and definitely take her comments to heart. We know that those that are working with our most vulnerable are really not paid to their potential and deserve and need to be compensated better. I am hoping that with the American Rescue Plan, we might be able to add some staffing or services in that department. I know that we'll be talking about that here in the future, but just wanted to share that in this public comment remonstrance forum. And I do to continue to get a lot of great feedback about our mass vaccination clinics, and look forward to hearing more about that. When I was able to volunteer up at the MaxVax clinic in up the McKinsey, both at the high school as well as down at the Leeburg fire station, there was over 600 people that came in, and they were just so thankful that the clinic came up to them. And so I find that our mobile response to getting vaccinations out into our rural communities is really successful, and people really appreciate that work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I have a couple of items. One is, this is our first meeting. Actually, we met the morning of March 16th, which was the same day there was yet another heinous act of gun violence, this time in Atlanta, particularly this one claiming 8 lives, 6 of whom were Asian Pacific Islander women. And I think I just want to acknowledge this and flag it, as it really just further highlights the need for our continued attention and urgency in naming and addressing racism, as well as gun violence and gendered violence, gendered sexual violence in particular, as public health crises. So I look forward to us continuing in that work, and want to thank the Asian American Council of Oregon for creating space and holding what was really a beautiful candlelight vigil last Sunday evening at the Free Speech Plaza. I was honored to be invited and included to help organize and say a few words there. It was really quite moving, and an important segment of our community that came out to stand with one another and provide support during a time of grieving for that community in particular. I would also very much like to thank Arwen for the comments this morning, and just again acknowledge this ongoing humanitarian crisis of unsheltered folks on our streets that is particularly aggravated, as everyone's anxiety and difficulties are, by the COVID pandemic, which we are still in the midst of. Really grateful for all the great work at our vaccine clinics, and just reminding folks that even once you're vaccinated, to please stay vigilant, stay masked, stay distanced. It's really important to help us get where we are going. But to Arwen's comments and that issue, I also just want to call out, many of us have been receiving, and I know I've been receiving individually, but as a board, comments particularly about an emergency microsite that we're working hard to stand up on county grounds by on the south side of the fairgrounds. I'm looking forward to a little more conversation about this later on our agenda, when we hear from Health and Human Services staff on updates around supporting our unhoused neighbors. But I just want to make a special comment that I think this is not only a challenging time for everyone, including our unhoused neighbors, but this particular site and this project is a unique opportunity for us to have some really important community conversations about who's impacted by homelessness, by where and how we stand up services, the difference between short-term emergency and longer-term solutions. But really ensuring everyone's safety requires easing suffering for all of us, housed and unhoused. And while it's challenging work, I'm here for engaging in these conversations individually and with community and neighbors and local businesses. And of course, with our staff, who is operating with such integrity around this issue, and particularly around this site. So looking forward to more conversation on our agenda later today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. I'm going to address something a little bit different here in remonstrance, because it's something I want to address publicly so that we don't violate public meetings law. I was forwarded an email from Representative Marty Wieldy, and I want to address some of what he had to say here publicly. First, I want folks to understand our state has totally disinvested in our district attorney's system. It used to be a completely state-sponsored system where the state paid the cost, because district attorneys file felony charges in our state court system on behalf of the state. The first words a district attorney says is the state charges, not Lane County. Over the years, the state of Oregon has disinvested in this system to the point where they merely pay a small portion of the elected DA's salary. The county has to make up the rest to make it competitive with the private sector. And we pay for all of the assistant DA's staff and the rest of the department's cost. There is a bill in the legislature now that would tax our district attorney's departments for filing charges on behalf of the state. It would charge them a fee to file charges for the state. So it's another attack on county budgets to support what should be a state-supported service. Commissioner Wieldy has announced he's going to support that bill because he's mad at the District Attorneys Association for Oregon. Now, mind you, counties are members of multiple statewide associations, whether it's the Oregon Sheriff's Association, the District Attorney's Association. There's associations that deal with our H&HS folks, our mental health professionals. And sometimes these organizations do lobby the state on behalf of their members on various bills, but they also spend a whole lot of time training their various members and sharing information. It's just one function. Now, because we pay dues for these associations, that is the reason why Representative Wilde says he's going to support this bill, because we should stop paying dues to a statewide organization, because he doesn't like the position they've taken on a couple other bills. Well, I really find this reprehensible and a lack of understanding of how our DA system has been disinvested in by the state. And then they want us to pay a fee to file charges on behalf of the state to try felons for felony crimes. And after Measure 110, we're not talking about drug possession. We're talking about people crimes, crimes against people. So I really, that pressure from Representative Wilde to a couple of commissioners to try and not pay dues into associations. We went through this discussion a few years back. I'm sure Commissioner Farr remembers it. I can't remember if Commissioners Buck and Chair Burney were on at the time, where we went through all of our associations we pay dues to, and there's quite a number. And if we're going to go back to that conversation, then we need to go back to all of them. But I really dislike the fact that Representative Wilde is putting pressure on local governments and then wanting to tax local governments for a state function just because he doesn't like an organization one local official is a member of and that we pay dues into. And I just wanted to state that publicly and get that off my chest, because I was really upset by that email chain I was forwarded yesterday.
Are there any other comments or remonstrances? I would like to, I don't know, I'm guessing Arwen is no longer in her car and listening to our meeting, but in the event that she is, I just would like to state that no matter how much we as commissioners or as citizens bemoan the distribution of wealth and resources, I heard two opportunities, access to opportunities, access to decent housing, the list goes on and on. I heard two crises that she was articulating, and I think by and large this board agrees. One is the crisis of a society is only as great as the degree it takes care of its most vulnerable. And we have so many vulnerable that truly are falling through the cracks. And that is a crisis. There's another crisis that was alluded to, and that is that those who devote their lives to caring for the most needy and vulnerable among us are often the most underpaid people as it relates to economic priority. And I see that as another crisis. When I was in ag business and dealt with a variety of farm worker issues, we saw the same thing play itself out in a different context. And I believe that this Board of Commissioners, at least this commissioner, absolutely agrees that both of those are issues that are bigger than we are, but ultimately must be addressed for our community and our country to move forward. Having said that, as just a philosophical statement, unless there's another commissioner that would like to add anything, we will move to item 6, county administration. Okay. 6A, COVID-19 response and recovery. We have Mr. Mokrahysky and Mr. Adams, and we look forward to this update, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I'm just going to turn it over to Steve to do the update, and we'll have a brief one and then entertain your questions.
Good
Morning,
morning, Steve.
Commissioners.
Oh, we can hear you. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Commissioner Burney and Commissioners, it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. So I begin, as I often do, with the epi curve. So this is these data are current as of yesterday. 10,727 total cases in the last 24 hours. Add to that 14 more. We are currently tracking 96 individuals in the county that we estimate are shedding virus actively. We have 9 people in hospital, 2 of whom are in ICU beds, and we have had no new reported deaths in the last 24 hours. We stand at 142. So you see a little jiggle, if you will, in that epi curve. It flattened out nicely, and we now see a little bit of upward pressure on that curve. And that then translates into the latest data that we have. This past Friday, we all celebrated the opening day, if you will, of going into lower risk here in Wayne County. So we had posted a low of 46.7 cases per 100,000. We just received the warning week data, which puts us now at 60.2 cases per 100,000. And that, of course, puts us on track back to movement into moderate risk. So you'll recall from the process, the modified process that OHA is now using, and the governor has announced, is that we're in a warning week this week. Next week is the movement week. However, the governor has instituted kind of a 2-week circuit breaker, if you will. So any county flagged for upward movement, having previously moved down, is given an additional 2 weeks to potentially see change in that to get back on a backward track. So that would put us on track for movement down, up, if as it were, no sooner than the 23rd of April. So we truly are in a race, as many are talking about, with respect to our efforts to vaccinate and move forward, getting as many shots in arms as we possibly can. So when I last had an opportunity to present to this board 2 weeks ago, I reported that we had, according to the latest alert data from the state, managed to get at least one vaccine into the arm of 79,000 people in Wayne County. So that included 34,500 who had one shot and 44,000 who had completed the series. So as of yesterday, we have yet to get updated data for today. We are now at 107,000 people in Wayne County. That's 28,000 additional residents of Wayne County that have entered the series. And as of now, 46,000, as you see, in progress, 61,000 fully vaccinated. So much of that activity, of course, is a function of our mass vaccination efforts that have been up and running. Over this past weekend, we were able to deliver 11,260 shots to residents at the newly opened Autzen Stadium MassVax Clinic. We also had a clinic running at the Lane Events Center, the fairgrounds, both Saturday and Sunday as well. And that 11,000 figure also includes a full day of operations at the Florence Events Center out there to bring folk forward. So obviously we've been reporting over the last few presentations in terms of coverage of our 65 plus population, as that we had, somewhere in the range of 4 or 5 weeks to really focus almost exclusively on our 65 plus population, in addition to continuing to complete many of the phase 1A folk who had not yet had an opportunity to access vaccine. So these data are calculated at the zip code level throughout Wayne County. I would note as well, we have yet to receive the latest update from OHA for our so-called jurisdictional data, meaning our detailed data for Wayne County, enabling us to see all the shots delivered by all providers in Wayne County. So these data are actually 2 weeks old. They are from 3/19, and they did not include the mass vaccination efforts of a weekend, 8 or 9 days ago, as well as this past weekend. So we're awaiting that. But even still, as you look at these coverage data, we have been quite pleased to see the degree of saturation of vaccine into our 65 plus population. And we know that many of the lower zip codes have increased given other events since. So for instance, Commissioner Buck mentioned the 2 clinics that were held up the McKenzie Valley Sunday a week ago, and those data are not yet showing up here. So as you look at these data in Tableau, you're able to actually mouse over each of the zip codes and see the total population of 65 plus and see the total number of vaccinations. So we continue to monitor vaccine access and equity and regional distribution by using tools such as this to ensure that we're able to cover each of the priority areas as we move more rapidly towards general population. So finally, commissioners, I'd like to just give you a bit of an update with respect to the vaccine phasing process. So you'll see in this graphic that was current the last time we met that Group 6 was to begin yesterday, March 29th. So Group 6, of course, begins to open vaccination opportunities to individuals 45 to 64 with an underlying condition. Some of our frontline workers in agriculture and migrant seasonal farm situations, seafood and agricultural food processing, as well as our neighbors experiencing houselessness, and those displaced by wildfire, among other populations. So Wayne County availed itself of an opportunity to move forward by a week, and we have been working in Group 6 since Monday a week ago, and we're able to complete missions over the weekend, and as well as open spaces in our mass vax that would enable us to move forward. We were operating under the assumption that Group 7, which is a much broader suite of frontline workers, would begin on April 19. However, this past Friday, 3-4 days ago, the governor announced that Group 7 would now become eligible on the 5th of April. So we are adjusting as we always do to move forward. And continue to plan for that group in concert with our other local government partners who are included there, as well as a broader suite of private sector firms who comprise a very long list of different kinds of frontline workers for eligibility. In making that announcement, the governor also outlined a process in which states or counties could attest to state government their readiness to expedite opening to full population, general population, 1 week earlier than the May 1 deadline now that we are currently operating under. So we're currently evaluating that. We'll continue to monitor our progress, looking at a wide range of parameters to be able to assure that we have done outreach and created sufficient opportunities for various elements of our general population to be able to access vaccination opportunities. As we plan forward, the coming weekend, we are scheduled for 10,400 vaccinations this coming weekend at Autzen Stadium and at the fairgrounds. We are also doing specific mini missions this week. We have staff currently, even as we speak, at Red Lion for Project Turnkey to provide vaccinations for those who were displaced by Holiday Farm. And we're working in concert with one of our Latinx community-based organizations, LULAC, for a mini clinic tomorrow, for which we already have 80 individuals signed up. So as we move forward, we will continue to emphasize mass vax opportunities, trying to maximize the number of shots that we can get into arms very quickly. We are augmenting that by creating opportunities to move the search and rescue team around, which has proven adept. A 10-person unit can deliver 1,000 shots in a day. They've done so multiple times in Florence. We're looking at other locations around the county currently to be able to create additional reach from our mass vax opportunities. We're continuing to look at specific community-based clinics with our community-based organization partners to ensure equitable access to vaccine. And then, of course, we're working to grow the pipeline of pharmacies and other providers out there who, once we conclude our mass vax activities, will ultimately be the primary vehicle by which we complete vaccinations, hopefully by this fall. Chair Bernie, that is my remarks for the day.
Thank you very much. And I see that Commissioner Buck immediately has her hand up. Commissioner?
I had a question about the number of vaccines that we're getting. You had mentioned this weekend we're getting about 10,000. I keep hearing that we may increase the number that we're getting even beyond 10,000. Have you heard anything about that? And what do you think the timing would be?
So we have been waiting eagerly. OHA began forecasting a surge in vaccine, particularly as the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was approved at the federal level. They've been working through production issues. They had a 20 million dose contractual arrangement with the federal government by the end of the month. We only learned late Friday that timeline is actually going to be met. So we have submitted kind of a surge vaccine allocation plan to OHA, demonstrating how we would distribute upwards of 30,000 doses a week, which is the forecasted surge level for Wayne County. It really has been one of speculation as to when that could begin. This current week, Wayne County is receiving only 13,500 doses to all providers. So this is kind of a down week for us. We've had 18,000 weeks in the last couple of weeks. OHA is focused very heavily this week on Multnomah County and trying to help them catch up on some of the population segments from the earlier priority eligibility groups that they have lacked progress on. We anticipate next week if I had to bet, I would bet that we're going to be one more week of kind of more normal, and that the week following is when we might actually start seeing surge supply. But we're planning for 2 scenarios at the moment and prepared to execute on either one.
Steve, I'd like to suggest that whenever we're talking as a group of county commissioners about how many vaccines we're getting for pandemic in our county, it's never normal. But I do understand your reference. Are there other commissioners that would? Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. And Steve Adams, I think you were probably on when I read the letter from Cindy Wheeldryer praising the staff that you're surrounded by. That's one of many praises that I've received personally. And I'm not the only one. Each county commissioner has not only received them, but reported it. And when people call me telling me that they're having difficulty getting a vaccination, I say, do this. Please just keep in touch with me and let me know your progress. Universally, progress has been made. And people are at the end of their wait, which in some cases is 1 day and 1 day longer than they want to wait. You know, I mean, things are happening very, very quickly. universally, people are very, very satisfied with the results. So Steve, pass that along as many ways as you possibly can, right down to the very volunteers who are putting their own time in. So Steve, salute to you and your staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Bozovich, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Chair Bernie and Steve. I just want to say, I drove my wife down to the fairgrounds to get her first dose of the Pfizer this weekend. It did take us an hour from the time we got in line to when we left the lot. But the organization, the volunteers that are there, everything was amazing. You guys are doing a fantastic job. I'm not eligible yet, so I have my turn. But a couple quick questions. You mentioned that by zip code vaccination and all that, and Tableau. I've been trying to find anything about vaccination on the links to Tableau, and I'm not finding that. So if you wouldn't mind emailing a link to the actual Tableau page and whether that's public or not, because it's not coming up from the public side of the Lane County website. On the case rate that we're in warning week at 60.2, the governor's had a policy in OHA of not moving people up. Is that going to apply to from lower to moderate? I know it's applied from high to extreme. So we're going to get a 2-week kind of warning period to try and get our case count under control if we do exceed and actually show a moderate risk level.
Indeed, Chair Bernie, Commissioner Bozovich, you were remembering that spot on. So when that 2-week warning kind of circuit breaker was first announced, it was high to extreme, but then was subsequently extended to all upward movement. So we know that will be in place for this particular period of time for us.
Great. I've been trying to communicate as much as possible to people that we still have to be careful. We've reached basically almost 20% of our adult population, only 16% of our total population. That still means more than 4 out of 5 people are unprotected. And even folks like my wife that got the shot on Saturday, it hasn't been the 14 days from the shot to become fully effective, and it was only the first dose. So we still have the majority of the people in this county that are not protected yet. So, people need to continue wearing their masks. They need to continue to distance. They need to continue washing the hands and avoiding the large crowds, or we're going to uptick. And that's going to really hurt our small businesses here in the county if we have to go backwards in our restrictions. I'm really proud that we made it down in the lower level. And I want to state here publicly again, I've done this before, the U of O did a spectacular job of gaining control of their outbreak. They had a real problem at the beginning of, after the winter break. Hopefully they won't see the same thing after spring break. But they went from, almost 300 cases a week to basically, less than 30, a huge reduction. And that's really what's helped us drop down into that lower risk is the work that the folks at the U of O did to get control on campus. So, hopefully we can stay there. And I encourage everybody just to, continue your precautions. Yes, the vaccine is getting out, but we're not anywhere close to herd immunity, and it's going to be this summer probably before that.
Chair Bernie, I could not agree more with Commissioner Bozovich's statements. It is a fragile moment. Businesses are taking tentative steps to reopen. They're beginning to hire, beginning to invest in inventory, and we're quite concerned about that. We are seeing case counts kind of in almost a seesaw fashion. One day we get 12 reported, the next we get 30 or 40. And what we're seeing in the case investigation is that the demographics are across the board. And it really, the kind of common underlying factor right now is just increased social interaction. People are so eager to engage in person with other people. We need just another couple of months, really and truly, in order for us to be able to reopen fully and safely.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Mr. Adams, for another great report. And as always, all your work. I had just a couple of things. One you addressed with, I was going to ask if there was a pattern of these new cases or any trends we're seeing in particular sectors or areas. So thank you for that. You have, as always, been really responsive and helping me answer constituent questions. And unfortunately, tragedy tends to attract other tragedy, and we're seeing a rash of scams coming out in the community. I've received a few messages, and you've helped me respond to those to constituents, but I think it would be beneficial to all the commissioners and to anyone from the public watching this to hear a little bit from you, as you shared with me, to pass on to constituents about that. And then I have just two other very brief things, but if you wouldn't mind, please sharing what you've shared with me about that.
Indeed, Chair. Commissioner Trigger, I'd be delighted to. So most recently, we've begun to see, and I suspect each of you as well in your private email accounts, beginning to see Pfizer-branded surveys trying to suggest that perhaps you received a vaccine and now they want a customer survey, right? So of course, it's just an attempt to extract personal information for you, from you. We saw earlier my spouse, who was phase 1A, actually received an invitation to a clinic about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, that was beautifully branded as a Marion County public health form. It was sent to her via Facebook. So she opened it and then looked at me. She showed it to me that evening, and there was spaces for your bank account. They wanted your bank account. So she said, you're not obviously taking bank account information, are you? And I said, no, obviously not. So you know, we, Jason Davis, our intrepid public information officer, has been really trying to educate people on the scam. So anything that is, you know, top of mind, our scammers are, you know, out there trying to get information from people. So certainly, I think we're, you know, suggesting that individuals mark that as spam so that their internet service providers see that, understand that that's the case. But in no way, shape, or form would public health, you know, sell your personal information to someone, nor would state government in order to try to provide products to you or services, and certainly would not be extracting information about your bank account.
Thank you so much. My other two, I wanted to clarify, you mentioned in talking about capacity of delivering once doses start flowing, you mentioned 30K a week. Is that your sense at this point of our maximum weekly capacity? Yeah, if you could just speak to our capacity for delivering doses once they're available.
Indeed. So that was actually the 30,000, just north of 30,000, was an estimate provided to us by OHA based on data that they were getting from CDC about the allocations to the states and what that would look like for kind of a pro rata share for Lane County. So our maximum capacity at all of our mass vac sites is 18,000 doses a week. We have additional providers in Lane County. Peace Health has opened their annex. They're delivering 2,000 shots to all residents of Lane County a week. They have satellite operations in Cottage Grove and in Peace Harbor out at the coast. So those, again, comprise an additional increment, and then anything beyond that is direct allocations to pharmacies and primary care providers around. So we very comfortably crested the 30,000 mark, and I think what we ultimately submitted to OHA, and I think we could have gotten higher had we put a little bit more time into it, was somewhere in the range of 35,000 doses a week.
Thank you. And then finally, if you could just share a little bit, I've heard from some folks, particularly as we've moved, and I don't think we even talked about that, from pre-registration to open appointment access on our website. how or if that's changed our call center in terms of what services are provided there and how that's operating and what the volume is at call center. Because I've definitely heard from constituents as well about long wait times or inability to get through to somebody live in real time on the weekend when the clinic sites are up and running and they want to know if there's extra dose available. So if you could just speak to call center services and volume, and then what people should do sort of last minute on the weekends to find out about available extra doses. Thank you.
Indeed, and Chair Bernie, thank you for the question, Commissioner Trieger. Call volumes have dropped quite dramatically. So I think some of that is demographic shifts in the eligible population. But we have seen a decline of something like 50% of the inbound calls on a daily basis. So we were regularly getting well over 1,100 calls a day. We're down in the kind of more average around 500 to 600 calls a day, in addition to outbound calls that we're making for those who lack internet connections to be able to schedule clinics. So it's much more manageable. The wait times are down significantly. The calls answered have increased. We've also increased our staffing pretty significantly in the call center as well. So we are hearing just in my daily updates that I'm getting from the team, the wait times are now much more reasonable. Often in the 10 to 15 minute range is the maximum wait time that individuals are having to experience. With respect to the scheduling for our clinics, so we don't have open call lines on the weekend except for contact tracing and case investigations, in which we're accepting inbound calls. So the call center is not going to be a way that people can call and find out if there are extra doses available. The way in which we schedule clinics, because of the growth in the number of outlets through which people can access vaccine, meaning I can schedule for Autzen this coming weekend, perhaps maybe on a Tuesday, but Thursday I managed to get a shot at Fred Meyer's, and thus I don't need my shot. So we are seeing that turn up in kind of no-show rates, and so we've been able to collect data week in, week out. And we've adopted an airline model where we're overselling for the weekend. And so we adjust that oversell rate by the demographic within which we're working. So it's fairly dynamic, but it's absolutely pretty close now. So we do not really and truly have extra doses at the end of clinic. So the number of extra doses that we have average maybe 1 or 2. At the end of a clinic versus 200 so there isn't necessarily any incentive for individuals to call looking for an extra dose or to hang out at a site, hoping for an extra dose. We've gotten pretty good at managing our vaccine and our mixing process, our lane closure process, and our scheduling process to ensure that we have sufficient vaccine on hand, and anything that is super time sensitive, there's an arm available to receive that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. One final follow-up and clarification. So if someone goes to schedule for a coming weekend and it says the clinic is full, is there a percentage in checking back a day or two before the clinic? Do things open up online?
They do sometimes. So one can continue to look for those opportunities. As we get greater clarity about what our out-week dose forecast will be, we intend to open 2, 3, 4 weeks worth of clinic dates for individuals. So once we hit this kind of surge and we understand what our dose forecast looks like in a more certain way, we intend to provide more opportunities. So I think in that instance, the individual not being able to get in this weekend could then just book for the following weekend.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for all of your great answers today and all the great work ongoing. Appreciate you.
Well, Commissioner Trieger, I would like to point out that you said you had 3 items and you had 4, but that's okay. I'm just being so. Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Bernie, may I ask a quick question before your turn? The airline model, Steve, sometimes leaves people on the ground. Do we leave people on the ground ever on the weekends?
No, Vice Chair Farr, we do not. Everyone there that gets scheduled gets a shot.
I think I knew the answer to that one. And Chair Bernie, you and I this morning talked a little bit about complacency. I'm expecting you'll bring that up during your turn, which I think is now.
I'm sorry, I feel complacent. Commissioner Bozovich, before I speak, did you have something or no? Okay. First, I would like to share that that's not the airplane model. Doctors have been doing that for years. Second, it's called overbooking. Second, in terms of the discussion about phishing for data, I just want to remark that I think this is a current issue in our society that goes across the board, from spam phone calls. Now that data becomes a commodity, and now that we live in what more and more feels like a surveillance society, and we can see how that ability can be used for good, right, in terms of what we're doing here, or it can be used to serve more nefarious purposes. It just becomes ever more critical that young people, or all of us, but especially young people, are taught to discern between truth and fiction, between fact and distraction. And I think that's just an excellent example, because people are preying on a different type of vulnerability when they are doing that. Now, having said that, 2 points. One is, it feels to me like a lot of this is a discussion of logistics. It's, you know, there were unclear directions from the federal government. States were scurrying to respond. There have been unclear directions from state government to where the rubber really hits the road, which is right here and what you are doing. And that's not, you know, that's just because there's been this misalignment that created chaos initially and a lot of frustration. It feels to me like now we're moving beyond that. We're moving to some levels of certainty. And by the way, for those of you that don't have you keep hearing business talk about certainty. Well, certainty is a desirable thing, even in terms of public investments, such as the one we are talking about right now. You never have it completely, but you need to establish variables. So my point here is, one, there's a big gap between capacity and supply. But when you talk about capacity, there's capacity of the county system. There's capacity of the private hospitals, doctors' offices, clinics, private. And there's capacity of the pharmacies, because all of this is an infrastructure that's being leveraged to deliver, correct? Closer and closer to where people are. You may want to comment briefly, you may want to save this for next time, but I would be interested in the capacities of each of those partner groups, the thinking, you know, you've given us global thinking, but the thinking of each of those groups in terms of how they are going to maximize not just capacity, but delivery, especially as you know, we're moving from the low-hanging fruit of people that desperately need and are motivated and want to get vaccinated to groups that might not be quite so motivated and might have different feelings about vaccination. And herd immunity, as Commissioner Bozovich mentioned, is not right close at hand. So I would be interested maybe next time if you could get a bit more granular and talk about both capacities and strategies of our key partner groups to maximize penetration, if you would, of vaccination in our community. Does that make sense?
It does, Chair Bernie. I'd be delighted to present on that next time.
I thank you very much. And that really relates to what Commissioner Farr was reminding me, and that is what we are hearing in the national media is that there is a complacency setting in. That, you know, we right when we're getting, you know, It's like that Simon and Garfunkel song, the nearer your destination, the more you're slip sliding away. It feels like health officials are concerned that a complacency amongst the public, which is the only reason we've done as well as we have, is because of the public. And it's the only reason businesses now are safely reopening. It is because of public behavior and business behavior. Is this a concern that you see as we hear about the potential for a fourth surge nationally? Is this something Oregon is sheltered from? I would like your, and then Lane County, I'd like your views on that.
I'd be delighted to present next time, Chair Bernie, on the capacity within the larger system. But to your final point, indeed, we see evidence of growing cases. It's showing up in our case count. We see evidence of fatigue within the broader public. It's been a very long year. The spring is beautiful. People definitely are wanting to get out and about. We see growing capacity within the national supply chain associated with vaccines becoming more widely available, and we're on the cusp of being able to begin to vaccinate the entire population as a whole, 16 and older. As we look into the summer, we think that we will see vaccine availability for 12 to 16-year-olds as the next step, and then potentially into the winter months, as young as 6. The outlook, I think, is good, but getting through this surge, this potential surge, is the key moment right now. So many have used the analogy of a race, and we see evidence of that daily as we recognize the risk in case growth. We absolutely, mission one has been to avoid avoidable deaths throughout this process and to protect the hospital system. I think some bright spots are that locally our hospital capacity remains quite good. We have good vaccination coverage within our older population. And so as all know, that has been disproportionately impacted throughout the pandemic. We have other elements of our neighbors in our community that remain vulnerable, and we're very concerned about that and very focused on trying to get vaccine into those arms. You rightly pointed to the public's role in their behavior showing up in the global case numbers that we're looking at on a daily basis. And we beseech the public to continue to protect themselves and their neighbors through their daily choices and behaviors. It is critical that we do so. I remain very optimistic that this availability of vaccine is in fact going to get us well over the 50% mark in terms of total county population, whilst we're still in mass vax mode. That's what we're really hoping for. But by the time that school begins in the fall, we really want to be in the high 70s, low 80s in terms of a vaccination rate in Wayne County. If we can achieve that, that means that we will go back into the fall and winter months when we know we will have additional outbreaks here and there in a much better position than we were this past fall and winter when we experienced the highest surge thus far. So it really is a critical race. We are looking at every potential scenario that we can to get vaccine into all population segments within Wayne County so that we can, in fact, protect our individuals, but also safely reopen our economy and get back to business.
Thank you very much. Are there other commissioners before we move to another topic? Okay. Steve, thank you very, very much for your elucidation. We are now on item 7, consent calendar. These are routine items by the Board of Commissioners, and unless any commissioner wants to call any of them out or discuss them, I would entertain a motion to approve. Commissioner Farr?
Chair Bernie, I move passage of the consent calendar for Tuesday, March 30th, 2021.
I'll second.
It has been moved by Vice Chair Farr, and was that you, Commissioner Trieger? And thank you, I'm sorry. And seconded by Commissioner Trieger. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Trieger.
I just want to call out that we are voting on something that is interconnected with an item later on our agenda around services being provided by Laurel Hill Center for the NEL. And later we're going to talk about the intergovernmental agreement with the NEL. And I'm just so excited for that project. So just didn't want it to get so lost in our consent calendar that we didn't get to call out this exciting and important step along the way to that project. Thank you.
No, thank you, Commissioner. This is a very appropriate item and time to call that out. Thank you very much. Anything else before we vote on the consent calendar? Okay. Approval of the consent calendar has been moved by Vice Chair Farr and seconded by Commissioner Trieger. Is there any further discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those approving, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Approval of the consent calendar made by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Trieger, has been unanimously approved 5-0. We are now at item 8. County Council, do you have any announcements today? Have you ever asked someone a question, you get this big, quiet, Mr. Dingle, are you with us? Diana, I think we're gonna move on, unless we're not hearing him and he's trying to say something.
I do not see Mr. Dingle on the meeting, Chair Bernie.
Thank you. Item 9, Health and Human Services, 9A, discussion, status update on progress with unhoused population initiatives. We have with us Karen Gaffney, Sarai Johnson, Steve Manella to guide us through this discussion.
And good morning, Chair Bernie and Commissioners. I'm going to start because I actually am going to say the least during this presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarai and Steve to provide what will be the first of our regular updates. And in addition to giving you the update, we of course will be interested in feedback for future updates as well. So I think Sarai, you're going to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you, Chair Bernie and Commissioners. It's wonderful to be here today. Steve Manella and I have some updates as well as a lot of time for some Q&A where we hope to get additional direction about the kinds of things you'd like to see in these updates, as we will be coming back every 2 months. So we look forward to that happening. If Diana, if you could make me a presenter so I could share my screen, that would be awesome. I'm not sure if I have that ability yet. And if not, it's going to be okay anyway. Oh, there we go. Good. Yeah, thank you. All right. Now you're not looking at the right thing yet, but here we go. Not this one. Sorry. This one. It's a pretty brief slideshow. We wanted to make sure that we could leave a lot of time for comments and questions. So today, the first place that we're going to start is a little bit of an update around some of the special projects. As Commissioner Trieger mentioned in remonstrances this morning, we are underway on the 11th and Beltline Camp relocation, which has also created some additional waves in the community in some different ways. And so where we're at with that project right now is it is on track. We expect that that will be completed by the end of April. And as a reminder and as a statement, around this particular location, of course, it's near Walmart, and it has been a location that's been a concern for quite some time. Unfortunately, it's taking a long time to make sure that we can resolve it. But however, we are near that point. So what we've been able to do so far is identify multiple locations for new microsites so that people who are camping in that location can be moved as a cohort as much as possible, while also creating locations where, you know, depending on what they prefer, where they would like to be in life, they can go to a couple different sites. So we have up to two in the River Road Community Organization. So we do have 2 tax lots on one particular piece of land that we're looking to do 2 microsites at. And then in the Jefferson West Side neighborhood, of course, the Lane Event Center is looking to place a seasonal microsite in on the south side of Amazon Creek, which would operate now until the end of June because of the immediate COVID response needs. We'll have to demobilize in June to make room for all of the events that will be happening likely at the fairgrounds over the summer. And then we would like to continue using that on a seasonal basis from November to March each year to place 6 pallet shelters and house folks in those units. So those sites, we have plans for them. We've conducted neighborhood outreach in both locations and been able to respond to a number of questions and concerns. Those will go into good neighbor agreements that we'll be adopting with the key partners in those neighborhoods to make sure that we're addressing concerns and questions that people might have. We've also conducted outreach to the campers at 11th and Beltline to find out how many people would be interested in moving into which location. About 10 people there are interested in moving. At this time, there are about a little bit more than 10 people there, but I think only by 3 or 4 or 5. So we are looking at the majority of folks being interested in moving. At the Northwest Expressway location, which is the one in River Road, of course, we've also identified folks who are already camping on that location. So we will also provide an option for them to become a part of the microsite because it looks like we'll have enough capacity for that as well. We are continuing to have conversation with neighbors in the Jefferson West Side neighborhood on the Lane Event Center site. We expect that conversation to continue over the summer as we plan for the seasonal use of that site. Next, we will be posting at least 2 weeks before people move, letting them know that that location at 11th and Beltline will be closing down and will not be available for camping in the future. We will begin construction on both of the locations for the microsites. We'll outfit those shelters with the appropriate amenities. We do also have to secure a service provider, so the RFP is out for that right now. We expect that to come back within the next week or 2. And then we'll support campers who want to relocate to a microsite as they move there. Others will be asked to leave that location, but they will have ample advance notice. In fact, they already know. And then we'll clean up and fence that 11th and Beltline property. So that's one where I'm sure that we'll probably have some good questions, and I'm happy to come back to this one at the end. We don't have a lot of material to go through today. We also, as a special project, I guess ultimately it's not really special. It's probably something we just need to be doing more, but because of the increase in visible camping in the last year, during the pandemic, we have a different level of humanitarian crisis than we saw before. So it's not necessarily that we have more and more and more people becoming homeless or who are camping. It is likely that many of these folks were already here, camping in places less visible or being kind of routinely swept into different spaces that weren't as easy to see. And we also might have more folks. It remains to be seen. So there are some research things that we're interested in doing, and I'd like to hear from you all as well about if you're interested in some of that. Where are we with this? We are currently working with the City of Eugene staff to identify public lands that might be available for building, as well as to identify land that might be available for lease or purchase, or other buildings that might be appropriate to transfer into an alternative use for a period of time. We're supporting a variety of alternative shelter and emergency shelter options, so looking for what is the best use for each location that we identify, and we'll begin to phase sheltering into housing wherever it's feasible over time. So looking at how much is it possible for us to place perhaps some pallet shelters and then maybe advance them into tiny homes, and or maybe redesignate a location for permanent supportive housing or other housing that's affordable to people. What's next is we're looking for a GIS tool that will be coming, I believe, tomorrow at our next meeting. Or wait, it's maybe today, I can't remember. I'll have to look at my calendar, but it's coming soon. And that is expected to help us with identifying where concentrations of people are already who are living in unsheltered locations, and also looking at what public lands are available we would like to not disrupt and move people all across town, all over the place, but to rather try to address where people are as much as we can. And also really in particular, looking to make sure that the locations where people are allowed to be and where they're able to sleep at night are throughout the community. So no one neighborhood or area is more burdened than another, and looking at the way to make sure that people have the opportunity to live where they need to be. We also have some team expansion now, so we're adding a couple of people who will be really crucial to this work at on the county side, including our facilities manager, Sean Waite, and it looks like management analyst, Jeff Kincaid, who's able to get stuff done. So looking forward to that. And we also, I'm sure, will have some questions or policy direction needed at a future date. A little bit of an overview of the latest on the homeless by name list data. I put a link here. It's a shortened link, so it's pretty easy to find. But if you and or anyone watching this is interested in taking a look at this data as it's updated every month, that's the link where you will find all of these dashboards. This in February, we had a slight decrease and slight increase in a few different areas, but as you can see, those numbers are actually pretty consistent. So it's not necessarily all the same people, but the same number of people in general are accessing services that are using the homelessness management information system, which is of course where we get the data for this homeless by name list. We also have, as you can see, this orange part at the bottom is 2021. So we are a large count down from where we had been in the past. There are a lot of different possible reasons for this. Again, this is based on services received. So there's a lot of sort of up in the air, how are shelter beds working right now? And where else are people going? And some things like that that have made this a little bit trickier. It might also be that a number of people have stopped receiving services for other reasons. So this is another place where we have a little bit of kind of digging to do around the why. But here we can see at least the what is going on. And then sort of the overview on inflow. So what you'll see is we have a large number of inflow this year. 300 of them are returning from inactive. And then as you'll see on the outflow, we've also moved a large number of people into inactive. So that's if they're on the list for 90 days and don't return for services within that time, they'll be removed from the list until they may return for services at a later date. So that number of people there kind of in the middle are a group that I'm particularly interested in because I want to understand kind of who those folks are, what they're experiencing, and how we can better support them. You'll also notice in our most recent inflow, we have a number of people who've lost housing, who were previously housed in PSH or rapid rehousing, and then 95 new folks. So that's a little bit lower than our last year average of, in 2020, where we saw about 138 on average new people coming into the homeless by name list system. And then year to date, this is our unduplicated number. So in 2019, of course, we had about 9,600 people, 2020, 9,100. So far unduplicated this year, we've served 3,818 people in these services. And then as you remember, the way that we're framing the projects that we're working on, that are systems projects, as well as ways to support more people getting into housing and shelter, is through Prevent. So we're looking at, right now we have, the written report that we provided with you has a lot of details, more details on this, but we have a rapid rehousing, sorry, for Prevent, we have a diversion and rapid exit or rapid resolution contract with Shelter Care. So they're providing that service right now. We are working actively on all of these projects currently. In fact, the one that's notable that you might be interested in is we have been starting to make some progress on the 75-bed emergency shelter. And we just found out yesterday that we may have access to the River Avenues facility a little bit earlier than expected, which will allow us to hopefully meet the timeline we're shooting for, which is to have this up and running by July of 2022. That is also in response to some state level legislation that would provide funding and other supports for this project here in UG. So all of these things are kind of moving ahead in different ways. I did want to mention that I think that it's valuable for us to also focus some of this conversation on understanding more deeply some of the recommendations that the Technical Assistance Collaborative had given to us a few years ago to make sure that we're able to make really thoughtful and strong decisions on all of this work as it relates to some of the minutia of what TAC had recommended to us, particularly around how we operate and how we make decisions about staffing versus RFPs, et cetera, within the way that we're doing business in the continuum of care, as well as, again, looking at the numbers. As you recall, TAC had recommended 75 shelter beds and 350 units of permanent supportive housing. We have some different numbers to reckon with at this time. So there's some kind of a little bit of stretching it out on the shelter side of things, as well as making sure that we're building out permanent supportive housing and other types of affordable housing for people to access as soon as we're able to do that. Steve, I don't know if you have anything to add to this particular part right now, but if you do, please feel free to shout it out.
Yeah, Commissioner Chair Burney, Commissioners, Steve Manella, Lane County Health and Human Services. Sarai mentioned a number of things that I can update you on in relationship to what we're doing. And one of those things that's getting a lot of attention is the homeless prevention efforts. We're in the midst of a recession, unemployment, a housing crisis, all at once. And so there are things that are unique about this time. Additionally, there's a link with the COVID crisis. So one of the things I wanted to make sure that you're familiar with is that we have put in place 111 motel beds of non-congregate shelter for people who need shelter. And while our congregate shelter bed count is down, we have put that in place. Additionally, we have another 25 units of shelter for people who have special medical needs that we put in place additionally to that. Our rental assistance programs, we had served since last September. We had spent $7.7 million and helped 1,900 households remain housed. And so if you can imagine, the rental assistance and homeless prevention efforts during a time of a rental housing eviction moratorium become more important. And we've recently received allocations that total $33.6 million and began on March 19th to open access to those dollars, as well as Homes for Good received an allocation of $15 million for landlord assistance during this time. So I also want to mention that during the time of a recession, one of the elements that kicks in are our county workforce program. You'll find that when you look at the data of the unsheltered population, that we have a large number of people who are out of the workforce, who are in the age range of 18 to 35. And if you've been around for a number of years and lived through recessions, you realize that a lot of young people have difficulty in entering the workforce, particularly during a recession, with the types of jobs that have been lost. And so that's an area that our workforce staff is working on presently. That's right.
Thank you, Steve. Karen, I don't know if you have anything to add, but if you do, cool. And if not, I'll turn it back to Chair Burney.
I'm happy to help answer any questions, but let's turn it over to the board.
Well, in the words of Ms. Johnson, cool. Do any, I can see a couple of commissioners that would like to make comments or questions at this point. Commissioner Farr.
Chair Burney, I'm anxious to hear comments and questions from the rest of the board, so I'll be exceedingly brief. And first to say thank you to Karen for assembling the panel, who made an excellent presentation on the progress to date. We've been working on progress for many, many years. It seems that we're accelerating progress toward providing housing at an excellent rate based on new resources that were unanticipated. Enough of that. I just wanted to mention that the big issue remains, and we sometimes talk about it, sometimes don't, and that is the acceptance of placement of microsites and other sites for housing. We're beginning to make headway, and Sarai, the work that you and the people you work with have done have helped elevate people's attention to the fact that most homeless camps and most elements of all homeless camps are non-threatening. But the perception of threat is always there, and that's something that we continue to work on. And Ms. Gaffney, we're working every single day on making people understand the nature of the homeless camps that potentially could be placed in their neighborhoods and helping people to accept them. I won't say any more about that. We talk about it quite a bit, and we will for years into the future. But Chair Bernie, I'm anxious once again to hear the rest of the board.
Are there any? Oh, Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. So I have two questions, and the first one, Karen, you might have to help answer this one. And I probably should have brought Steve Adams back in for this. One of the things that's really caused a lot of this very visible camping this year has been the fact that we lost a lot of our capacity in our shelters due to COVID. You know, everything from our supported housing that used to be two people per room had to go to one. You know, I'm thinking of sponsors and some of their housing, you know, got halved. You know, all sorts of shelters basically lost 50% of their capacity. As we're seeing vaccinations increase, in particular, I know we've got outreach programs to try and vaccinate homeless. Are we going to see some of that capacity come back online? Maybe that'll help with some of the camping issues. But one of the things I'm really concerned about is how the homeless, you know, they have such a hard time with maintaining paperwork and identity issues. Are we, and this is going to be a heck of a thing with HIPAA and all that, are we going to try and track maybe who we've actually vaccinated, so that if we're trying to shelter these folks in a couple months from now, that we can put two vaccinated people in a room together with each other or in closer proximity, so we can get back to capacity? How are we going to, you know, kind of maintain some kind of record for these folks that may not be able to carry around that little card, you know, that they get from the clinic, like my wife got on Saturday, you know, because, you know, how hard it is to keep paper records out in the elements. So just kind of a question, kind of a twofold question. Do you see our capacity coming back as vaccinations increase? And how are we going to help those folks track being vaccinated?
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Commissioner Bozievich, you actually wrapped several questions up inside that one. So I will go ahead and start, and Steve and Sarai may have things to add as well. Absolutely, we saw an impact on our capacity because of COVID. And as Steve talked about, we've invested in some alternatives in terms of hotels to help compensate for that. But there absolutely has been a danger in congregate sheltering. So we've decreased capacity, increased spacing, and that has had an effect. And quite frankly, I think not only have we decreased capacity, but there also are people who are homeless who are nervous about living in congregate settings right now. So we have both of those dynamics at play while we're addressing COVID in the community. So it's been absolutely a priority to address that underlying condition, as you said, to get people vaccinated, so that we can then have everyone feel more safe about some congregate settings. And then I also think, as we look at what our future solutions look like, many communities are moving away from investing in more significant large congregate settings to looking at some of the other alternatives. So I think there may be some learnings out of COVID that we carry forward in terms of our future approaches to sheltering people who need that. And in the interim, yes, capacity is going to start going back towards normal as our case counts go down and our vaccination levels go up. As the board knows, last week we hit the group for qualifying for a vaccine that includes people who are homeless. So those individuals are now eligible for vaccinations, and our public health staff are working hard with community partners to do that outreach. We do keep track of everyone who's been vaccinated, whether you're housed or unhoused. We absolutely keep that in our state alert database because many people have a hard time holding on to a card. So we will have that resource for people as we move forward. If they need to have a record of when they were vaccinated, we absolutely will provide that for people. I know one of the big questions in our system has been, when exactly will the CDC and the health authority shift their restrictions on congregate settings? I don't have a date for that yet, but clearly as we achieve our vaccination goals, that becomes more and more possible for those settings to increase capacity. And I think in some places, we're already starting to see people do that planning. And so I don't know if Steve or Sarai have any more specifics to add to that.
I can speak to, I just recently learned that the mission has started slowly opening up some more beds. They weren't able to take people from about maybe early to mid-December until the middle of February. So they've been starting that process again, though I know they're moving with a lot of caution because they want to avoid any additional outbreaks, of course, right now when we're kind of hopefully in the home stretch-ish of this situation. So that is starting to happen. And we'll get a little bit more movement, I think, in that system there, hopefully, once they're able to sort of fully open back up. But that, again, is going to be an iterative process.
I'll also say that we have increased our outreach efforts in West Lane, East Lane, Springfield, and then working in conjunction with the city of Eugene. And that has been directly related to outreach to encampments and the ability to assist people with documents, as was mentioned before, that are going to be helpful for getting them back into housing. That activity has increased in the report that we submitted. We have 4 additional outreach workers from a special COVID grant to do that work. And so that will assist as we begin to put people back into beds in emergency shelter and transitional housing.
Thank you. I see Commissioner Trieger has had her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I won't preface this by a number of things I'm going to raise, so nobody has to keep count.
That was a dig that was well deserved.
I think first I just want to really thank staff for bringing this back to us, and it's great to know that this will now be an every other month. When I raised several weeks ago a request that we elevate the conditions of folks who are unhoused and unsheltered to a similar status to response to the Holiday Farm fire and COVID by having regular updates. This is exactly why, and I'm excited for it. And it goes to what I mentioned in remonstrance, which is while there's operational and logistical and programmatic pieces to get updates about to inform our policy and our budgets, this is a bigger issue around culture and conversations in the community and better understanding who it is we're serving and the conditions that led them to being unsheltered and unhoused. I'm really appreciative and really looking forward to these updates being conversations across commissioners and staff about this really failure of our society to protect folks. To that end, on the sort of philosophical, cultural side, I appreciate the numbers that Mr. Manella shared, and it makes me think a lot as we move forward into a recession recovery. Considering unique populations, particularly women in our community, we already know that one of the single greatest indicators of poverty for women is motherhood, and that many, many people who are unsheltered and unhoused in our community not only are women, but are mothers, whether their children currently are living unsheltered with them or not. And I think that is a unique and specific population that we have to consider and keep in mind. Additionally, I think it's really important for all of us, but the general public in particular, to remember that unhoused people are not necessarily not working folks. In fact, many people who are unhoused and unsheltered are workers. And this is really important with the intersection, as Commissioner Bozovich was raising, about the importance, even after vaccination, to maintain community protections with keeping distance, washing hands, staying masked, because those of us who can access vaccine more readily and more easily are still going out and doing things like grocery shopping, and more as restaurants opening, visiting restaurants, traveling and staying in hotel rooms. And the people who are cleaning those hotel rooms and waiting on tables and bussing those tables and clerking in grocery stores are some of our most vulnerable folks, and many of them do not have a home to go to after their shift. And so it's really up to us to help keep them safe and keep them protected from COVID. I really wanted to flag that and call that out as part of our collective responsibility. On the really specific sort of operational side, thanks for bringing up that I had heard that as well, that the mission actually has some available beds starting to open back up. I also wanted to point out that when you shared the graph, Ms. Johnson, of services accessed, and that you called out that that doesn't necessarily reflect the services, who's needing services and whether they're getting them, much like our unemployment numbers, right? We get a number from the state about how many people are unemployed, but actually it's how many people are receiving unemployment benefits. And there's usually a big gap between those two numbers due to people who are no longer eligible because of time or have stopped looking for work and so on. So just important to hold that. My one very specific operational question is, I noticed on my way into work this morning an increased number of pallet shelters at the west end, the northwest end of the fairgrounds, where we've been staging those as those get assembled. I know at least 6 of them are the set-asides for the Lane Event Center microsite. Have we purchased additional shelters, pallet shelters, or are those ones that are now being collected back in from other sites and going to be redeployed? What is the plan for those? It looked to me on a quick glance that there's a good 10 or so on top of the 6 that are set aside for the Lane Event Center microsite.
Steve, do you know more details about that? Because I know we've had some conversations with people who've had them at different sites about them kind of looking to demobilize.
Yeah, we had been retaining some pallet shelters at the Lane Event Center for deployment to Springfield. There's a site in Springfield that has been lagging, but the council has given approval, and the nonprofit group that is sponsoring them is Mainstream Housing and is ready to do so. So I anticipate that those will be moved out, and the other ones have been moved back in for the specific relocation project that Sarai mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think they might have come from the mission.
Okay, great. Thank you, and thanks again for this. I'm looking forward to this every couple of months, and of course, I know you're all available in between, and appreciate that. And undoubtedly, we'll be reaching out with some particular questions and concerns, particularly as we start to stand up the event center and the Highway 9 or the Northwest Expressway sites. So thank you very much.
Yes, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of items I wanted to go over. First was, we have been deploying mobile units, and I was wondering if there was an update on how they were doing, where they're reaching, and what data they're actually able to obtain and get and link people to services. I can go on for my other questions, but that's one.
Yeah, Steve, I think that's outreach related,
Right.
So you might have.
Yeah, Chair Bernie, Commissioner Buck, I can get some additional data to follow up on the numbers of folks who've been outreached to. We've been very pleased with the outreach to Oak Ridge, the city of Oak Ridge, city of Cresswell, city of Cottage Grove, who has done an outstanding job as well. And And so we should have data for those areas of the county, Bonita, Florence, Junction City, and as I mentioned, we currently have more outreach people deployed. So I'll get you an update on what we're seeing and how many people we're reaching in those areas.
That'd be great, maybe for the next update. Also on the next update, one thing that I've been particularly interested in as we've been moving through the TAC report is who's participating with which dollars. So at one of our larger meetings, we were able to have some financial updates. We're all moving through to our budget season soon. So at the next update, it could be tentative because we may not have finished our budgets by then. But I'm always interested in which participating entity has brought money to the table and how much and for which part of the TAC process that they're sponsoring. I think that shows a lot to our commitment and what's included in the respective budgets. So that would be my ask for a future update, is just to keep monitoring that. I also want to acknowledge, Sarai, that you are doing way more than your original job description. And I appreciate all that work. Relocating and helping people to these microsites wasn't necessarily what I anticipated as somebody who's trying to implement the overall TAC report, but you're doing it. And it's so appreciated. I'm hoping that in the American Rescue Plan, when we have some funding for services for the unsheltered and our service providers, that we may be able to add some support because this is such a large issue. And we know that yourself and Manila's office have been doing an overwhelming amount of work that really deserves some additional support, because it will take extra effort to kind of walk us out and even try and get us back to what we considered our normal services before COVID-19 began. So I just wanted to point that out. And the last item was surrounding our service providers. It's really important to me that we have ongoing conversations and meetings with our service providing agencies and asking them, what do they need? What do they want and need from us in order to make their work actually more successful? So I was interested in if you have those regular meetings, if we need to convene those meetings. What are they saying as to what help they could see in order, like I mentioned, to be more successful?
Right. Could I take that one on? Yeah, we have a Chair Buck, Chair Bernie, we have a monthly provider forum meeting that we have in place, and all of the providers who are working directly with the county or are working on homelessness or human services are invited to partake in those discussions. And most recently, a lot of the focus of the discussion has been around workforce, recruitment and retention, and then the ability for those organizations to be able to flex and respond in a time of crisis. And I might mention that we have organizations like Community Supported Shelter, Carry It Forward, Square One Villages that are entering into the space. So what we're finding is a more diverse group of providers who are coming to the table who bring their unique perspectives.
Commissioner Buck, was that all?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Oh, no, thank you. Commissioner Bozich, did you have your hand up? No, okay, I'm sorry.
Sure. Were you recognizing me, or were you getting ready to go into yourself? I can wait till after you. I just had a couple more I wanted to get to, a couple questions. So.
No, go for it.
All right. First, I just want to say thank you to Sarai and the staff there. I forwarded a question from somebody to her last Friday with Safe Shelter for Saisaw students. It's a new group that was formed down in Florence to try and prevent homeless students and all that. And her and Jacob Fox were very fast to get back to their new executive director and help her out in navigating some of the system and try and help the students out down there. In fact, I think pallet shelters is one of the things that was offered as a possible short-term rapid rehousing solution there. So thank you for that, Sarai. My question was on the 350 units of permanent supportive housing we identified. That target was identified a couple years ago, and you're noting a couple things in the report, like the comments on MLK. But there were other things that have happened since then. So I'm kind of wondering, do we have, since that target was set, how many units have actually come online and how many are in the pipeline? Because I know that our housing improvement program grant that we did was 2.1 million, was funding over 90 some units, and MLK was only 51 of those. So, and the other 40 some aren't mentioned. So do we have a progress number of completed and in the pipeline for that 350?
We do. I actually had just sent it through to Nora Cronin to double check my numbers, and I haven't been able to check my email yet to see if she was able to respond to that. But for sure on the HIP grant, I think that is a place where I could definitely do some follow-up and check in with the other providers alongside Homes for Good were completing some work. So I know some of those projects were for sure completed. I don't know the status of a couple of them. So I can check in on that for sure. And then, yes, we also do have the Project Turnkey Hotel, which right now, of course, is being used to house wildfire survivors who don't have a home to go back to just yet. When that use concludes, then we will be redeveloping that property into permanent supportive housing. And I think the number of units, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, is perhaps a little flexible. There's some space in the building that hasn't been completely built out yet. So I'm not sure how many units we'll end up with there specifically.
Yeah, that's the Project Turnkey is a great example, and appreciate all the support from board members who helped with the Realtor and the Oregon Community Foundation and the state in making that successful. But that's an example, along with 100 River Avenue of how we've been able to pick up some pieces as a part of our TAC initiative with the disfortune of the COVID crisis. In terms of the goal, Commissioner Bosevich, I think, Sarai and I have had discussions about this with our management analyst, Lisa Stewart, and putting together something that retools some of the assumptions that were made by the TAC consultants. I think we all know that there's a great need for affordable housing as well as permanent supportive housing. And Commissioner Farr will appreciate this, that before we brought in the consultants who were very optimistic about us being able to bend the curve before this COVID crisis, our local folks had estimated that we needed about 600 units of permanent supportive housing. So, again, I think that given the cost of housing, we're just going to have to continue to be creative about opportunities like motels, other properties, and other ways that we can more affordably bring in additional units.
I guess I I'm a little bit wanting to be able to show the community the progress we've made, as people are like, what are you doing? Things that aren't being counted. There were those micro homes in Cottage Grove for veterans that we funded. There was some transitional housing for people aging out of the foster care system that we, that was 20 some units, I believe, the OWL or whatever it is. And there was some of the units in the Commons at 6th and Oak, that project were supported housing. That running tally doesn't, what's in the report is two things that are just happening now. And it's really not showing the community, once we made that commitment in the TAC report, start really working on this, how much have we brought online and the capacity we've added each year. Kind of, we need to be telling that story over and over again, so people get a feeling that we are doing something, because all people, they're getting the visual that's happened because of COVID, where we're not moving camps, and and also the Ninth Circuit decision, where it's become so visible, they don't think that we're doing anything. So being able to say, since we made that decision to try and achieve 350 units, we've built 200, and we've got another, 150 in the pipeline, or 300, whatever it is. That's an important thing we need to be repeating in the community, I think, so that people don't get discouraged and understand we're making some progress and trying to address this situation. That's kind of where I was coming from with that question, is that's really not evident in the report, and it'd be something good to have and keep track of and publicize.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sorry, Sarai, I didn't hear a question, but I want to move on. Did you want to add something to that?
No, I was just going to say I will absolutely make sure that's evident in the next report. Sorry about that.
Okay. I perhaps made a mistake, but I did it. And I kind of opened another round in calling on Commissioner Bozovich. So is there any other commissioner that would like to make any statements or comments at this point? Okay. Sarai and Steve, here's what I would say. One, I could not agree with Commissioner Buck more about providing some hard data around partnership contributions, what that's going to, how that connects with the whole. I could not agree with Commissioner Bozovich more that we need hard data, Excel spreadsheet type of stuff that demonstrates what we're doing. I think that, let me just leave it there. I recently attended remotely, don't need to say that, a session from the director of the Office of Affordable Housing Programs from HUD. And there is money coming down, a good amount of money, in a variety of categorical programs, from community development block grant to homes program, et cetera. I want to know what you see as the money coming down and what you are planning to apply for to supplement this initiative.
Chair Bernie, we can send a update of what we have received and what we're looking to apply for. Some of those funds come to us through the state of Oregon, and some of those opportunities are only available to the cities of Eugene and Springfield. And so we'd be more than glad to put something together to share that information.
Okay, I would appreciate that. So, I think in my mind, an update is starting to form that looks at financial contributions, that looks at specifically what's been added to housing stock or various options for shelter options. Without getting into the making of the sausage, Steve, the dollars are going to be coming in. And this is an opportunity to capitalize an initiative that you all have been giving your lives to. And so we ought to be able to start seeing the fabric of a whole picture here now, especially, if I may also add, Sarai, in my conversations with you, many times you've inferred or hinted at or suggested that there need to be modifications in the TAC report. I'd like to see the specific proposals for what those modifications are, so that with all this information, we can start tangibly exploiting the opportunity of new resources to patch gaps and really move forward arm in arm together. The only other point that I would make, because Mr. Manella brought up the relationship between kind of work and poverty, right? Jobs, people, and workforce. I'm going to suggest that we are not going to be able to tackle true radical workforce transformation until we start looking at not, especially with the populations you all work with, not changing people to fit into jobs, but changing jobs to fit around people. And especially when you look at the various issues, strengths, weaknesses that people bring with them, looking at moving out of this pandemic and building back better. That means building our people back better too. And I just want to suggest that's a paradigm shift. And I can't wait for workforce systems to start embracing that with some of the more vulnerable populations that they deal with, much like Pearl Buck Center and others have marginally in the past. And I would also like to point out, because Mr. Manella mentioned attraction and retention with some of the partner agencies. My understanding is that's because they don't pay enough. That's because their packages, they don't have the dollars to provide resources and benefits, which I and others are constantly struggling for. And that's just an issue. I don't have an answer to that one, but that's just an issue. And finally, in terms of preventing displacement, I believe you know, but if you don't, I'm really hoping we can help with residents of the patrician, the vulnerable senior manufactured home facility. I was fortunate enough to work with Jacob Fox, and with 30-hour advance notice, we were at Homes for Good provided a $50,000 non-refundable security deposit to enable that option to continue, for the option to purchase the part. So because it relates to this, last weekend the residents created a cooperative. It's called the Filbert Grove Cooperative. That now is a mechanism for CASA of Oregon, if they can get the gap funding of $400,000 together, to enable the residents, in fact, to purchase it and relieve the unbelievable fear and anxiety that has been pervasive throughout those 130 residents of 81 manufactured homes. And I don't know how, but I hope that also is built into this initiative, which is the prevention of displacement, and working with key partners to do that. So I know my comments didn't invite responses. You're more than willing to, but I certainly hope in the update we exploit the opportunity to take a quantum leap forward. Oh, thank you, Sarai. That's a big thank you. Steve, Sarai, anything else or anything from any of the other commissioners before we move on?
I would just like to thank the board for the good questions and the interest in what is a humanitarian crisis, and we have some work to do.
And if I may, on behalf of the board, Karen, Sarai, Steve, thank you, and keep the wind at your backs. Okay. We are now going to move to item 9B, Order 21-03-30-07, in the matter of approving an intergovernmental agreement with Homes for Good to support ongoing services funding for the Nell Housing First project. And we have Karen Gaffney again, and with her, Jacob Fox.
Thank you, Chair Bernie and Commissioners. And we kept our presentation time pretty brief, so I'm going to yield most of that to Jacob. I just wanted to start by acknowledging Commissioner Trieger noticed there was a companion piece on this topic on the consent calendar. So we definitely are going to take this time to provide an update on that project. And we do have an item of action for you as we move through that, but I thought that it would be of most interest to the board also to get a status update on where the project is. So Jacob is going to walk us through this exciting piece of momentum on our work that we just finished talking about. Jacob.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Just kind of warm thank you to the members of the board for just the last conversation that I listened to. And I think there's a lot of challenges in front of us and a lot of hope that we're delivering for our community. So just a quick update to touch on just a couple projects really quickly, because I think it's important to acknowledge the work that we're doing. But we all participated in the virtual grand opening of the Commons on MLK, and just wanted to give a quick update that out of the 51 units there, 24 units are filled by human beings that were experiencing chronic homelessness and frequent users of emergency services before they were provided a home that, quite frankly, they're entitled to. Also excited to report that the Keystone, which is located at 13th and Tyler, which will be 15 units to serve homeless families, we launched construction in January, and walls, as many of you know who drive by there, are being raised. And this October, we'll be moving homeless families into that incredible project. And then specific to the Nell, which is located at 11th and Charlton. So basically, we're narrowing in on kind of the final financial reviews. We submitted what's called a subsidy layering review to the Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C. And that's where they analyze the financial structure of the project and approve use of the project-based housing choice vouchers. So that'll be 45 units in total. The building looks relatively similar to the Commons on MLK. Particularly right now, the goal is to break ground on May 12th. There's no indication at this time that that timeline will slip. So everything's going well on that front. So these projects would not be possible without community support, and particularly support from Lane County. We simply would not be in a position of delivering these units to the community without Lane County's partnership. So we just are very thankful, and the project is coming together, as I said, really well. And with that, I'd turn it back to Karen for an update on the specifics of this IGA.
Thank you, Jacob. So the action before you today is actually very similar to an IGA that we entered into with Homes for Good probably 2 years ago now, in anticipation of the construction of the Commons at MLK. I think it's important for the public to understand the piece that really makes permanent supportive housing different from other affordable housing is really the services that we provide to residents who live there. So as Jacob indicated, the individuals who will benefit by being able to be housed at the Nell are some of the most vulnerable in our community. It'll be similar to our project at MLK Commons. So these individuals absolutely will be most successful to the extent that we can provide services and supports to them associated with that building. Some will be on site, some will be services that we're able to provide through partners in other collaborative locations in the community. As part of moving this project forward as permanent supportive housing, Homes for Good needs to be able to demonstrate that there will in fact be services provided to make that PSH. So the intergovernmental agreement that we are requesting permission to sign with Homes for Good basically says that Lane County will guarantee that those services will be available to residents at the Nell. And we anticipate providing access to those services through a variety of funding resources at the county. And Steve Manila is the person who's responsible for really weaving together a variety of funding sources to provide that. So again, some of that will be provided and funded through services that come directly to the county and the Human Services Commission. Some of those services will likely be provided by other partners. We're actively in negotiations, for instance, with our coordinated care organizations, our CCOs in the community, who also have a strong stake in making sure that people can be successful in permanent supportive housing. But the IGA guarantees Homes for Good and their financing that those services will be available into the future. And I don't know, Jacob, before we turn it back to the chair, is there anything else you'd like to say about this specific item?
I guess the only thing I'd mention, and Lori alluded to this earlier, but Laurel Hill has been chosen by the county as a supportive services partner for this project. We have a deep history and positive track record of working with Laurel Hill. They're an exceptionally talented and committed team. They're also very sophisticated at Medicaid billing, which is part of what they'll be doing on behalf of this project, is providing services that can be in fact reimbursed by Medicaid. So I just wanted to kind of say that Shelter Care is the supportive services partner on the Commons on MLK. Things are going really well with them, and we have every expectation that Laurel Hill will be a successful partner. I guess I'd also say that supportive service agencies like Shelter Care or Laurel Hill can also be a resource for supportive services funding, as they're able to seek grants and leverage funds that Homes for Good or the county may not have access to. So, Karen, I guess that's all I'd add.
Thank you. So, Chair Bernie, we'll turn it back to you.
Sure, you want to do that?
Very
sure. Are there any comments from commissioners before we entertain a motion? Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I have a quick question, clarification based on, as Mr. Fox just mentioned, these service providers that get contracted with to provide service have their own capacity, expertise, access to resources. And so it's my understanding, are we to sign this IGA, what we're really committing to is ensuring the funding is in place, whether that's that we provide it or that we support or facilitate other entities in securing the funding. So it's not, if I'm understanding correctly, it is not necessarily committing us to providing the funding. It's assuring that we're confident the funding can be secured through us and or some combination of other sources and channels. Is that accurate? Chair Bernie and Commissioner Trieger, yes, absolutely. That's the guarantee so that they can move forward with the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. And once again, I'll try to be very, very brief. Commissioner Bozovich had earlier asked for a spreadsheet on the permanent supportive housing projects that we have in place or in the pipeline. We're talking about two of them in this particular agenda item, that both the Nell and the Keystone are part of that pipeline. And as we develop that list, it's easy for anybody to look at and access to determine the progress that we have actually made in the last, I'll say, 7 years. These projects are very, very strong cornerstones of the progress that we've made. So I just wanted to mention that to you, Commissioner Bozovich. And the second thing is something that that Jacob said about Laurel Hill. That's a particularly important thing when we consider how the projects are going to be funded as far as being permanent supportive housing for the future. Laurel Hill is very sophisticated at Medicaid billing. And we should not lose track of the fact that much of the services that we provide in the facilities that we're building and are in the pipeline will be actually funded through ongoing payments through Medicaid and sophisticated billing by Shelter Care, by Lane County for that matter, and by agencies like Laurel Hill are an integral part of making certain that the permanent supportive housing is sustainable for the future. So thank you, Ms. Gaffney, and thank you for this great presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there other commissioners that would like to comment or ask a question? In that event, even though this, first of all, Jacob, while you're on camera, I gave and want to give again a tip of the hat to your flexibility and aggressiveness and appropriateness in dealing with the patrician and keeping that alive for the residents. I know that's not this topic, but publicly, thank you very much. Even though all commissioners have been supportive of this, and this has been a journey to get to this point, my understanding is that this project is in Commissioner Trieger's district. Is that correct? Commissioner Trieger, would you like to make the motion?
Thank you, Chair. I would be delighted and honored to do so. I just have to pull the number up. I move that we pass Order 21-03-30-07 in the matter of approving an intergovernmental agreement with Homes for Good to support ongoing services funding for the Nell Housing First project.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Order 21-03-30-07 has been proposed by, made by Commissioner Trieger, seconded by Commissioner Buck. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? And let the record show that motion 21-03-30-07 has been unanimously approved 5-0. With the vice chair applauding. Thank you very much, Jacob. Thank you very much, Karen. We now move to item 10, County Administration. I see 10A, Order 21-03-30-08, in the matter of approving receipt of a Business Oregon grant to support McKenzie Fire Recovery. And we have Austin Ramirez to lead us in this discussion. Hey, Austin, how you doing?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Bernie and Commissioners. Thank you for the time today. Commissioner Trieger, I believe this is my first time presenting to you, so I just wanted to introduce myself briefly. My name is Austin Ramirez, and I'm the Community and Economic Development Manager here at Lane County. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much.
And a Springfield resident. Thank you, Austin. Please continue.
Right. I appreciate the plug. So, today, we are requesting approval of a grant from Business Oregon to support McKenzie Fire Recovery. Earlier this year, you may recall the E-Board appropriated $2 million to Business Oregon in order to provide financial assistance to municipalities impacted by the 2020 wildfires. This was through a program they titled the Municipal Wildfire Assistance Program, or MWAP. So the intent of the MWAP is to provide technical and capacity assistance to municipalities impacted by the wildfires. And while this program is approved through June of this year, the state did ask us to apply for expenses through June 2022 in expectation of the program being extended by the legislature in the near future. So after being awarded for our initial proposal, we were encouraged by the state to apply for additional funding, which was great news. Both of our proposals were awarded 100% and approved for funding through June 2022. So in total, we are approved to receive approximately $750,000 for several key recovery activities and positions. There's a lot of detail in the board packet. I'll just touch on them briefly. The first position is the McKenzie Fire Long-Term Disaster Recovery Manager. That's the position that was created by the county that Matt McRae filled. And as you know, he's the lead staff member responsible for managing local fire recovery efforts. The second position we were awarded funding for is the Mackenzie Fire Disaster Resource Management Analyst. So that was another new position created by the county in response to the fire that was recently filled by Laurel O'Rourke, who was previously in the Dovetail program. Laurel's the lead staff member responsible for coordinating resource navigation systems for wildfire victims. The third position we've been awarded funding for is the Mackenzie Fire Permitting Navigator. This is another new position the county is looking to create in response to the fire. Keir Miller will be speaking more about this position in his presentation to the board tomorrow. But this position will be dedicated to providing guidance to property owners on the very complex permitting and rebuilding process. One of the programs that funding will also go towards is the Dev Northwest Wildfire Recovery Navigation Program. So this program has been one of the most impactful resources for wildfire victims. Dev Northwest's trauma-informed approach and expertise in financial well-being, debt counseling, foreclosure counseling, housing assistance has really made them uniquely qualified to create this one-stop shop for wildfire victims to help them navigate the many bureaucratic and complex systems associated with recovery. So this funding would allow them to increase the FTE dedicated to Lane County families from 0.3 FTE to 2 FTE. So really a huge jump. And there, the demand is there. That's not what's impacting capacity. It's just that they need additional funding to be able to increase the impact of this work. Funding will also go towards Blue River wastewater technical assistance. So specifically to move forward with feasibility work on this critical infrastructure project. And then lastly, while a reseeding project was deemed not eligible for the program, the state did award us the requested amount anyways for any unexpected costs that would be eligible in the future. So sort of a smaller, flexible pool of funds. So while some of the positions in this proposal are currently funded by the general fund, an ongoing funding source has not been identified. We really believe securing additional sources of funding will be key to catalyzing and sustaining the long-term recovery effort, which we know will take several years. And so as such, staff recommends the board approve the acceptance of the Business Oregon grant and authorize the county administrator to enter into any agreements associated with this grant. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. Before, the chair does not want a motion yet, but are there any comments or questions pertaining to this item? Commissioner Buck.
I wanted to add for the public that's viewing, another important piece of this particular grant is a technical assistance grant for the wastewater system. I did testify yesterday on behalf of a bill that would help create a wastewater system if there was an existing water system. We hope that goes through. And the grant, the technical assistance grant as part of this would go a long ways in trying to figure out how to provide a sanitary district for the region, which is critical in rebuilding and recovery. I also want to thank Senator Pruzansky for his encouragement to apply for these funds and support of these funds in order to get out to wildfire victims upriver. We've done a great job hiring for the positions that this would fund. I have every expectation that the same will be for the permitting navigator, which is so critical for people who have never navigated, never anticipated navigating our land management division, which we know is a complex state system of land use laws. And we so need some support there in order to help people, especially if they're applying on their own, in order to go through each department within land management to conclude an application in some kind of efficient and speedy response. So I would encourage my fellow commissioners to approve the grant. I think it's a critical movement forward in recovery. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just call out that talking about working with Dev Northwest, for, and again, anyone from the public watching who may not know, that is an organization that, while it's a new name, it is not a new organization. It's formerly NEDCO, Neighborhood Economic Development Corporation. I had the honor of working with that organization for quite some time on some regional food work and food system work. But just like our conversation earlier with the IGA and talking about Laurel Hill being skilled and experienced in navigating complex Medicaid billing. It's really important that this organization is part of this program, because this is exactly what they do, is help folks navigate complex systems around foreclosure prevention, debt recovery, and so on. So I'm really excited to see them embedded in this this proposal, and I think they are exactly the right partner to have in this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other commissioners that want to weigh in on this before we vote? I would simply not only echo but add to what Commissioner Buck said. I have a good friend that happens to be a Springfield resident that develops plans and has 12 clients upriver, and he's a professional, and he can't navigate through some of the arduousness of this system on behalf of his clients. So it's just double needed. Hello? Oh, she went away. I'm going to attempt, and I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to attempt to give the courtesy of the commissioner whose district a particular item is in to make the motion. So with the permission of the entire board, I was wondering if Commissioner Buck would like to make this motion.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll move approval of Order 21-03-30-08 as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It has been moved. Order 21-03-30-08 in the matter of approving receipt of a business Oregon grant to support McKenzie Fire recovery has been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Farr. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Farr.
Chair Bernie, with your indulgence, I just want to point out how effective Austin Ramirez is in this work and all of the work that you've addressed since coming to join us at Lane County, Austin. You just introduced yourself to Commissioner Trieger. Commissioner Trieger, you're going to notice that Austin is a very particularly effective individual in getting things done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr. Thank you all.
Let it be noted that this is one of the few instances where the chair absolutely agrees with the vice chair. Is there any other discussion just kidding, Pat. Is there any other discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving Order 21-03-30-08, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Let the record show that Order 21-03-30-08 moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Farr, has been unanimously approved 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramirez.
Thank you.
Diana, my understanding, we're at County Administration. No, we're not. 10B, Mr. Mokraheisky. I'll get there. Are there any announcements?
I just have one quick update. On March 16th, the board, Commissioner Bozovich had asked, and the board gave head nods to request that staff meet with the City of Eugene to discuss a possible intergovernmental agreement for reimbursement for the costs associated with the employee, the City of Eugene's payroll tax that was recently implemented. The board wanted us to do that over the last couple of weeks so that we could report back to you. So we have had those conversations. Our staff has met with the City of Eugene staff. They have expressed appreciation for us reaching out and respectfully declined their concerns related to the impact on and the challenges presented both for the city and other public partners. I did have a chance to correspond a little bit with the city manager over the past few days, and she was very gracious and expressed an interest to have a conversation just to talk about their view about the other ways that the city and county work together, where we don't charge each other for services. She mentioned land use and urban transition area and other ways that we partner. I did share the board's perspective on the issue related to particularly other tax collection measures such as the TRT where we do have a more formal partnership. So that is that's the update for you, and happy to answer any questions or do any follow-up on that.
Are there any questions, or is there any follow-up or comments on that? I see none. Well, I see no follow-up. I see no action here. What's next? I kind of thought Commissioner Bozovich might have his hand up. Yes, sir.
I wasn't bringing my hand up now because I figured it would come when we get to boards, future board agenda items.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Thank you. I didn't know.
There is follow-up to this because, frankly, the land use in the urban transition areas is a benefit to the city, not the county. But I can explain that later.
Okay. So, Commissioner, nothing for now, but you're going to bring this up later in the agenda. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Mokrahysky?
No, that's it, unless you have any questions or comments for me.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Mokrahysky? You have our trust and confidence, sir.
Thank you.
My understanding, Diana, is that there is no executive session today. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair Bernie.
Then we are on item 12, other business. Are there any other business items to review? Seeing none, it is 11:30 and our morning Board of Commissioner meeting is at recess, and we will resume at 1:30 this afternoon. Thank you all very much.